Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining.
I'm Alex McPeak.
And I'm Bria Grangard.
And this is The Good, the Bad, and the Buggy, brought to you by SmartBear. Thanks for joining us for this live podcast series where we'll be talking about software and application quality and how technology influences the way you think of different companies.
Throughout our podcast so far, we've been sharing some of our own experiences, talking to guests, and analyzing different cases of testing, development, and design to consider what works and what doesn't, because a lot of the time, quality is in the details.
So I have a question for everybody today. Who has listened to our podcast before? Almost no one, which is great because we are going to do a reflection of the last 10 episodes we've done. We just got to our 10th episode. We're really excited about it, and we want to give you guys a taste of what we've been talking about and then share some of the adventures we've had along the way, as well as our biggest lessons we've learned.
We also want to just give you a quick overview of who one another are so you can understand why maybe we covered our 10 different topics and what brought us on all of these different adventures today. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce you first, or you want to go for me first?
You can go.
All right, so this is Alex. She is a die-hard fanatic when it comes to cats. She is often found in an Uber ride because she hates public transportation. She loves coffee, and she loves pumpkin-flavored beer.
That's true.
Is that all good?
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
This is Bria. She went to Dartmouth. You will probably hear her talk about it if you ever talk to her. She enjoys the musical stylings of High School Musical, Mamma Mia, The Greatest Showman, and she enjoys bird watching.
All right. So with that, let's go ahead and kick it off, Alex. You can take episode number 1.
Okay.
Ooh.
You got it?
Thanks.
So this podcast kind of all started with MoviePass, which, if you don't know, it is a subscription app, and you basically pay $10 a month, and you can see any movie that you want in theaters. This is also where Bria and I's friendship started, because Bria really wanted to see The Greatest Showman. She asked if I could come with her, and so we signed up for MoviePass because it was a great deal. And so we ran into some technical difficulties when we actually started to use MoviePass. We, had to check in on the app, and you could check in to see a certain time, and then you were supposed to go to the theater, and you would be receiving your tickets at the theater. And they do this by, they have a geolocation API, and it is able to see where you are, see where the closest theater is, and then, you can check in that way. But the problem is that we checked in really early because our office is so close to the theater. So we checked in at 9 a.m. We got to the theater at 6:30 after work, and we were unable to get our tickets. So, we're in the app, it's not letting us get our tickets, and we're so confused about what's going on. And I'm about to miss the trailers for The Greatest Showman, and I love watching the trailers before the movie, and we're just both kind of confused about what's happening. So, we're trying to get in contact with support, we're trying to delete the app and re-download it, and we're trying to figure out how we can actually get these tickets. But the issue is that we were really excited about this new application, and then we, got to the theater, we're really excited, and it kind of just ruined it for us. It was really anticlimactic, and eventually we did get our tickets. We did see The Greatest Showman. As I've mentioned, Bria does still love the soundtrack and listens to it almost every day.
Every day.
But the experience that we had with that was really difficult for us, and it made us really frustrated. So, we went back to work, we told our coworkers about it, and we told them about all the frustrations that we had, how difficult it was for us to actually, get the tickets. And we looked a little bit more into MoviePass and how it works, and yeah.
That was it. So before we even decided we ever wanted to do a podcast, we actually looked into MoviePass, we became obsessed with it, and we made this like our weekly girls' night out. And it was really frustrating, and it was the first time we were like, wow, your application and your experience with your application, whether that's on a phone, a computer, whatever app you're interfacing with, can really make or break your opinion of a company's reputation. And so this, as well as a few of our other events, which we'll talk about, really was what made us want to kick off a whole podcast series. The second thing we actually went to in our second episode is drunk user testing. So for those of you who aren't too familiar with it, it's for your application should be so easy that any drunk person should be able to navigate it. So, got the boss's approval. We were like, hey, sorry, Kate, we got to go get drunk and go test some applications. Once we got the sign off on that, we brought another coworker along with us. And, we were trying out all of these different companies. We were trying to book tickets on a new travel website, and we were also trying to order different food on a catering website. And we were successful with some, we were not successful with others, that's for sure.
It seemed the more you drank, the less successful you became.
Yeah, and I think we arrived a little too buzzed maybe than we should have been, but minor details. But this was really interesting. It was our first time hearing about drunk user testing, so we went into a little bit more research. We found Richard Littauer, who literally does this as part of his profession. Brought him on, and he talked to us all about it on our second episode of our podcast.
Yeah, so drunk user testing kind of sounds a little bit goofy, especially, talking to a ton of QA and development professionals out here. You're probably like, we're never gonna hire a drunk user tester. Why are you talking to us about it? But if you are updating your UI of your app, if you're doing a new feature, or if you have a new idea in general, it is a really interesting way to get user feedback. Obviously, we've probably all heard of user testing, and it's a really good way to get valuable, honest feedback about that, because people
Very
don't really
honest.
hold back when they've been drinking.
Yeah, Alex, I'm pretty sure you didn't hold back at all your
Yeah, I
feedback
don't think
that day.
either of us did.
All right.
So next, this brought us to, Richard told us about a few of the things that he's found in his experience as years as a professional drunk tester. And one of the things was too long of text walls is really off-putting to people because they don't like to read a lot. The second thing was he's colorblind, so he runs into that issue a lot, and we'll actually talk more about that later. And the third thing is dark patterns. He says that they're really evident when you're drunk testing a website, when people are trying to trick you into doing something. So we actually did our next episode on dark patterns. So a dark pattern is a UX device that is used to trick people into doing something on a website or an application that they weren't originally intending to do. So whether that's clicking something that they didn't mean to click or buying something that they didn't mean to buy, they're really common, and we kind of see them all the time. But as users, and even sometimes in the industry as software professionals, we don't always recognize them, but they're not really a great user experience, and they're definitely something that makes your users lose trust in your company and you as a brand. So we wanted to explore some of the dark patterns that we've come across and talk a little about them and why they might not be such a good idea for you to implement in your application.
Yeah, some examples may include when you're actually booking a ticket on an airplane and then automatically it adds insurance, or it upcharges you to an extra legroom seat. That's definitely one dark pattern. If you also are checking out on Amazon and it accidentally adds an item to your cart, that's another thing. And there's so many of these dark patterns out there that exist that I had no idea about. Now I know I'm definitely way more aware of it, and just like checking it out here and there and saying, ooh, that's definitely frustrating now as a user, and I don't want to deal with that in the future.
Right, I remember my friend and I were buying a ticket to a bus to New York, and she was wondering why she was able to pick her seat, and she thought it was a really great feature of the website that you could pick a window seat on the bus a little bit towards the front and have your preference, but then it charged her another extra $10, and she ended up paying $10 more than I did, because I was aware that it was a dark pattern. But this is just something that's really common, and they don't necessarily make it evident that they're going to charge you those $10 extra for a seat. And for you, it might not mean a lot. It's just $10, but they're making a ton of money off of these dark patterns. And there's so many that have become industry standards. So maybe you've ever signed up for an app or a subscription that has a 30-day free trial or a week free trial, and you have to put your credit card in, and you're like, that's weird, because why would I have to put my credit card in for something that's free? And then if you don't cancel it after those 30 days or whatever the time allowance is, they actually continue your subscription of it, and they continue charging your card. And this probably sounds familiar to you. I know it's happened to me a bunch of times.
Happened to me last week.
And it's hard to remember to actually cancel those things, but that's actually a dark pattern, and it's a really common one. And it's something that's really important for us as companies to look out for when we're designing applications and testing them, because it's a huge deterrent for customers. People just get frustrated when they're being forced to do things that they didn't mean to do. And it's just a short-term answer that negatively impacts customer trust, like I was saying before.
So episode 4 came in hot because it was perfect timing. It was Prime Day, and I'm sure everyone here had heard about what happened on Amazon Prime Day. Definitely some different opinions on what happened. Some of us were really frustrated. Alex was really excited because she got to stare at photos of dogs all day. But basically, you know, Amazon, of course, crashed on Prime Day. They did everything they could to prepare for it. We actually brought on SmartBear's expert for monitoring and load testing to come talk to us all about what you need to do to prepare for this, what are some of the steps Amazon did take, and what are some of the steps they could have taken. At the end of the day, we both agree that they had the best fallback ever. I mean, puppies, I was angry, but automatically I was good.
Yeah, so basically what happened is, you know, the homepage for Amazon was pretty much working throughout the day, but then they had about 75 minutes of downtime where if you clicked away from the homepage or you tried to look up a product, it would fail and give you a 404, and each different time you got a 404, it was a different dog. So, you know, for me, I was very happy and also happy to take advantage of this situation for a podcast, but for a lot of people, they were really frustrated. It was estimated that every minute Amazon was down, they were losing about $1 million or so, I think a little bit more in money. So, I mean, even if that's not frustrating for the customer, it was probably really frustrating for Amazon that they're losing a ton of money every minute on the biggest day of the year for them. So a few things we learned from Dennis is, one, you have to load test the entire user journey. The thing that we found is that the homepage, you know, it was stable and it was good, but they didn't test what happens when you go to the next page after that, and that's why they were having issues. But equally important is monitoring your site and knowing that you have to have a remedy in place in case it does go down, and it seems like, you know,
they thought through that at least.
Yeah.
I think other things we learned from this is Amazon can maybe get away with it to some extent, or at least they had a really good fallback plan. But unfortunately, if you're in this situation and you don't have a fallback plan, you haven't been monitoring your site, and you don't get that notification right away that you're down, you can definitely not only lose out on revenue, but also lose out on trust with your customers. It's really, really hard to buy back trust or ever get trust back again. So we just definitely took a lot of learnings away as far as, like you mentioned, monitoring that entire user journey, but also load testing when appropriately, and Amazon Prime was our perfect case study for that day.
Right, and now that Cyber Monday is coming up, definitely a good thing to keep in mind too.
Stay tuned.
So after that, we decided to take inspiration from somebody that we really enjoy, and her name is Angie Jones. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of her here, but she wrote a blog for us once about the importance of diversity in testing. So we decided to look this up a little bit more because we weren't really sure what it means. You know, we all hear about the lack of diversity in tech, and you know, it's important to hire a diverse team, you know, but it also kind of affects the way your products are released, and it can have an effect about the way they work for different people when those perceptions aren't actually considered in the making and the testing of those products. So a few examples that we searched and found were skin color recognition. So we actually found a soap dispenser that wouldn't recognize darker skin tones, it only recognized lighter ones. And there's also been similar problems with heart rate monitors and other things that have to detect skin color. And this is because the data that's going into this was probably from a lot of lighter teams with lighter skin colors, and that's the kind of information that was being received, and so it wasn't accounting for diversity.
Yeah, and as we're moving towards technology today, where things are all about, you know, different sensors, and you want to do facial recognition to open up your iPhone or maybe Touch ID, it's really important to get that diverse sample size for your testing. And I think Angie really highlights the well point of, yes, you want to build that diverse team, but you also want to take into considerations all of the diverse teams being a part of also your testing sample. Otherwise, you can definitely run into this and you're not identifying certain people, which is totally unacceptable.
Yeah, and we actually also talked to somebody that did the Google study on voice recognition for Alexa, and she found that because most of the people that were working and contributing to this data were male, that Alexa actually has more difficulty recognizing female voices because the tones are completely different, and women tend to talk quieter, and it doesn't always account for these scenarios. So a woman actually found this when she was driving in her car, that she was able to communicate with her car, the voice recognition system, and her husband had a perfectly fine time. So as we do talk more about, you know, machine learning and artificial intelligence, it is really important to remember diversity is a huge part of collecting data and using it as we start building out those products. And we try and be innovative, but also to be inclusive.
So another topic of discussion that we often hear, especially in the software testing world, is folks who are trying to adopt automation on a broader level. You're trying to automate X% of your tests. You're trying to completely integrate that into your pipeline. And we actually were hanging out one day at the Commons, and we saw that there was a new restaurant opened up here called Spice by a few MIT kids. In this restaurant, they actually have robots make your food. I was totally geeking out. No one else in this audience seems to be geeking out, but it was really, really cool. And you go in, and what you do is you place your order on a tablet, you walk up, and you see actually a screen flash up, and it says, Bria, now making your chicken Thai bowl, or whatever it was. And then you see the robots moving, grabbing all the ingredients, and mixing it around in basically this conduction pot for heat. After that, it passes it off to a person who then puts on the finishing touches as well as the garnishes and makes sure that everyone is okay. When we were doing this, we were talking about it, and we were just like, wow, this makes so much sense and actually is so relatable for software testing. In this restaurant, Spice, they actually figured out a way to automate and make it more efficient, make it also a little bit more fun for the user, but they still recognize the importance of having a manual tester, having those checks and balances in place, and saying, hey, this can't 100% be automated, but we've been able to reduce the number of staff that we have and make this a better experience and more efficient for all. And so when we were thinking about this, we were thinking about it from the software angle as well. We often get asked, is manual testing or is my job going to be taken away from artificial intelligence or automation? And the answer is absolutely not, in our opinions, as long as you, in my opinion, I guess I can't speak for you.
I agree.
But as long as a human is going to be interacting with your application, you're going to need some type of human to be doing testing. Exploratory testing, that's going to be really important moving forward. It's going to be it's always going to be important right now as well as moving forward. You want to make sure that you're doing all of those checks. You want to make sure you're trying to think about those edge cases that you can't always predict. And right here, we had the perfect case study. Alex also just got to go to lunch with me, so that was a win-win for her. But it was a really great comparison, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, you go into this restaurant and it looks like robots are pretty much running the place, but if you take a step back and you think about all the people that are involved, you realize that complete automation is not possible. There's the 4 kids from MIT that actually came up with the idea in the first place and had to do the engineering work behind the robots and program those repetitive actions that the robots would be completing. They also brought on 2 executive chefs. So there were 2 people that were kind of behind the scenes to create new recipes as the seasons change, bringing new things in, doing the best ingredients, and bringing creativity and innovation in that way. Then there's obviously the people that need to maintain the machines, keep the restaurant clean, and like Bria mentioned, there's somebody at the end of your order to put on the finishing touches, add the garnish, and make sure that your meal is complete and that all of their customers are satisfied, that they can receive any feedback or comments or questions or anything like that. So though we do have a really great need for automation, for Spice it was a way to cut down costs, and they were able to provide affordable options for students. Their bowls are under $10, which is like kind of not something we come across a lot here for lunch options in Boston. But there is a lot of manual work that still needs to be done, and to forget about that is, to have a huge misstep, especially, whether you're talking about food service or whether you're talking about software quality. So the next thing that we decided to talk about, and like I mentioned before, the drunk tester kind of brought this into light for us, but we wanted to look into accessibility a little bit and what that means when it comes to your software. So we found actually a plugin for your computer, for your web browser, and it's called C. And it actually will transform your browsing experience into what it would be like for somebody who's colorblind. So if you're not colorblind, then that means that you're usually hard to tell between reds and greens. And we found that this was actually a consistent problem when you're going across different applications. A lot of times when you're trying to check out with something, because red and green are often used as colors to try and imply something, such as, green is you're doing something right, red is you're doing something wrong. So we'd see form fields and you're missing information and they'll highlight it in red. But if you're colorblind, that's not something you can see. So doing this experiment and using this plugin kind of brought to light the fact that we need to be more thoughtful of other people's experiences. And colors are great for adding a little something to your application and your experience, and we love a colorful experience, but at the same time, color maybe shouldn't always be used to imply actions or to try and get somebody to do something or make a notification about something.
Yeah, I think until we actually used this plugin for the first time, I didn't really understand all that you should be considering when it comes to design of an application. Like you mentioned, absolutely, don't get rid of color. Color is wonderful, but maybe there are other ways of indicating, hey, maybe it's not the red asterisk to say this is a required form. Is there another way that you should go about doing this? And we really learned that through this C plugin, and also talking with a few other experts on this topic who came on to the podcast as well. So this was really good. We got our team involved as well who helped us with it. I know for the day or two that I actually did it, my productivity went way down. So that took a little bit of rebounding mentally, and also felt like I was staring with my eyes closed. It was a little hard to navigate.
And on the last note for that, use accessibility and inclusivity as a way to improve overall usability instead of thinking it as a barrier to good development or a good product, because a lot of times the best inventions that we've found are actually things that people have used to help people with an accessibility issue. One of the examples that I used was using screen captions on the TV. I mean, I think people think it's really weird that I do this, but I always have the closed captions on in my TV.
Closed captions, not normal.
But this was obviously made, for somebody that is hard of seeing or hearing, and I actually getting there. And I actually use them for myself when I have to keep my TV a little bit quieter because my roommates are sleeping, and it lets me read the information that's going on without having to have it on full blast. So that was the other thing that we learned from the accessibility episode, is that there are ways to kind of use it for inspiration and to improve your design rather than hinder you from making something that is really great.
Absolutely. So I'm getting really pumped up because the next episode was definitely my favorite episode that we got to do. For those in the room who do know me, I am obsessed with working out. It's kind of a problem. And I was like, Alex, can we please just do an episode on fitness apps? If you've ever heard of Sweat by Kayla, I was very active on that app. And then we also ran across Active, which is two totally different apps. So the first one, Kayla is known by over 10 million people, and she does videos and demonstrates them, and she puts you on an entire plan. It's really cool. The second one, Active, is completely audio only, no visual cues whatsoever. And we were just thinking about what the differences are that you have to have for an app that actually shows you video versus an app that just has audio only, and you just have to be so declarative and so descriptive in striking with your midfoot when you're on a run, and just how important and how different that is. We actually brought on one of the engineers, the lead developer engineer there from Active, to talk about why they chose to do this and the movement they're taking there. One of the biggest learnings I had, and I think that you had as well, was just we want things personalized nowadays. I know for me, one of my favorite things about Sweat by Kayla was seeing my progression and having these workouts tailored towards me. Where on Active, I kind of lost that overall. And just the feedback they've gotten as well is that everyone wants things personalized. We want to see our progress. We want to be able to measure the goals. And not just in fitness apps, but also in other apps or other experiences that we're going through today. I want to say, hey, this is my journey. This is where I'm at, and this is where I'm going. Here are my goals. And I think that was a really good outcome and takeaway that we had from that episode.
Yeah, something that I found while doing Active, Bria and I both do it now since we had this guest speaker. We were like, this is such a cool app, and this is something that we could really use. And so I'll do a workout, and Bria's like, what's the workout that you did? Would I like it? And I'm like, I don't know if it would be hard enough for you. So I think that having that option to make something, more difficult or easier depending on people's skills or levels or intensity in their workouts is really important, and it's something that I know that they've received feedback on, as well as we've definitely experienced in our time, in our experience with these workout apps. And then I think the other thing that's really important is meeting people on the devices that they're using. We're a very on-the-go population today, and
we are the definition of millennials, with 18 different devices. I need to access all my apps at once.
Yeah, and having, people are always on their phones, and they have their TVs at home, and they have their work computers. So it used to be about the boutique fitness classes or going to the gym, but now people want to, they have crazy schedules, or they have flexible schedules, or non-conventional schedules, and they want to be able to go home and do a workout when they're home on their TV, or do something that they can follow on their phone with those kinds of instructions. So
I went on a run at 4:15 this morning. That would have been impossible without Aptiv.
Yeah,
it
that's
should
very
be
true.
impossible.
It should be impossible. So that brings us to our next episode, which was actually, we call it Deadliest Bugs, which is more so the worst software bugs of all time. Hopefully you know at this point that the podcast is called The Good, the Bad, and the Buggy. So we really wanted to highlight some of the worst software bugs, like I just said. In 2017, software failures actually cost the US economy over $1.7 trillion. So when you take a step back and think about it, it really puts into perspective, the cost of a bug and why it's so important. As software testing professionals, we can't really just expect to release bug-free software. It doesn't happen, but we do also have to realize the importance of testing sooner in the software delivery life cycle so that these bugs are more preventable and easier to fix and less costly to fix when we do.
Yeah, this episode was a lot of fun to research because we found so many bugs and just also the amount that they cost each company and also the reputation. We're not going to go through all of the statistics here with you right now, but I definitely encourage you to look it out. But like you said, I think we came away with it's important to test earlier. It's important to test often. We hear about the shift left movement. We hear about teams always telling us, even teams here in this room, that we are trying to test earlier. We're trying to collaborate with our development teams, our operations teams more often. And that was really a big takeaway, I feel, from this episode.
Yeah, if you want to hear about how the NASA Mars Climate Orbiter pretty much exploded into space because of a software bug, or British Airways Terminal 5, how they had to pay out $200 million in compensation, you should definitely listen to that episode. But I think it's something that we can all really relate to in this room, is the importance of finding those bugs and squashing them.
So the final episode we did, episode 10, it had to be a big one, and it ended up being a scary one, in my opinion. We call it Hacked, and it was pretty terrifying. We brought in someone from McAfee to talk to us all about security testing, and I learned all the things that I do wrong and about how anyone can hack me at any time. I also learned that Alex does more stuff wrong than me, so that's okay. So she's way more easy to hack than I am. And this was, of course, we talked about Equifax and their compromising of data. We also talked about that Home Depot credit card breach as well. And then, we always hear about the Facebook hacks. And it was just really interesting. It was really cool to think about. And just, Alex, have you started updating your phone and your apps a little bit more often?
I've been pushing it off because I know with how many updates I have, it's going to take a really long time. But.
She said that when we recorded the episode a month ago, too. But no, it's really great to think about, the security, and security is going to continue to become so much more important. It's already very important, but we're going to continue to see a large emphasis on that moving forward. And we talked about some of the best practices that you can adopt today, but I think one of the fun things that I actually learned about was this idea of ethical hacking, and I didn't even know about it until I was talking with my mom one day, and she intentionally sends out to her company fake emails that are spammy but aren't actually spammy, just their IT department is sending them out just to test and see, hey, are my employees going to actually click on that link? And when we were talking to the guy from McAfee, he was like, that's not uncommon at all. It's definitely a best practice, and it really trains you on how to identify, a fake email, a phishing email versus a real legit email. We get emails all the time from Justin Teague, our CEO, seeking us to go run around and buy $500 in gift cards, and I don't think that he's actually sending those at 2 in the morning.
Not yet, anyway.
But it does come through like it is his email. So we learned about, ethical hacking. We also learned about penetration testing, and we also learned that I'm gonna probably get hacked and I'm gonna be terrified and lose all my money.
Hopefully not, because now we've learned so many lessons about, how to prevent that from happening. And like Bria said, ethical hacking, penetration testing are really great ways to find the breakpoints in your application, so that you can figure those out before a hacker figures them out and then exposes your customers' data, which is really important. That actually might be the biggest risk that we've talked about today, is having your your customers' data exposed, because once they have that issue, they're really going to lose trust in your company, and they might not ever come back.
So with that, we want to just wrap it up and say that was the quickest hits of our, I don't even know how many minutes of podcasting we've done so far. So our 10 episodes, we're releasing our 11th episode, I think, right after this session. We're going to go ahead and drop that in live.
Called Smart Homes.
So stay tuned if you're interested in anything and all things Alexa and what she's always listening to you. So we're going to be talking about that. We have a lot more exciting topics coming up as well. Feel free to stop by our booth to get a free t-shirt. And with that, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and get ready for the next presentation here, I believe, at 8:30.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.